Pay attention to this footage captured by a local resident on their cell phone. You're looking at the Riverside Bridge in Millhaven, and beneath that concrete structure, something massive is floating in the murky water. Look closely at the crowd gathering above, hundreds of people pressing against the railings, phones out, all recording the same impossible sight. Now focus on what's in the water itself, that enormous flesh-colored mass suspended just below the surface. Notice how it's almost the size of a small truck, with what appears to be limbs or appendages extending outward. The person filming zooms in, and you can see the texture of the thing. Smooth, almost human-like skin, but distorted and swollen beyond anything natural. In just a few hours, this footage will lead investigators to one of the most disturbing discoveries in criminal history. What's floating beneath that bridge isn't what anyone thought it was, and the truth behind it will expose a conspiracy of murder, illegal experimentation, and a scientist's descent into madness that claimed multiple lives. You know that feeling when you drive past the same place every single day, never giving it a second thought? For the people of Millhaven, Oregon, the Riverside Bridge was just part of the landscape. A weathered concrete structure built back in the 70s, carrying traffic over the slow-moving Cascade Canal. Nothing special, nothing memorable. But on March 17, 2016, that bridge became the center of a nightmare nobody could have predicted. Millhaven was one of those mid-sized towns where everyone kind of knew everyone. Population hovering around 85,000. The kind of place where the biggest news was usually high school football scores or the annual Harvest Festival. It sat nestled in the Willamette Valley, surrounded by farmland and forests, with the canal cutting through the eastern edge of town like a gray ribbon. The Riverside Bridge connected the downtown district to the newer residential developments on the east side. Thousands of cars crossed it daily. Joggers used the pedestrian walkway. Kids rode bikes across it to get to the park on the other side. It was just there. March in Millhaven meant rain, lots of it. The kind of persistent drizzle that turns everything gray and makes you forget what sunshine looks like. That morning started like any other. Commuters heading to work, coffee shops filling up, the usual rhythm of a Thursday morning. But around 7:30 a.m., that rhythm got disrupted. Tommy Chen, a 34-year-old delivery driver, was making his morning route when he crossed the Riverside Bridge heading east. He'd driven this route 5 days a week for the past 6 years. He knew every pothole, every crack in the pavement. But that morning, something made him glance over the side of the bridge. The canal water below looked different, disturbed, like something big had moved through it recently. Tommy didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a log had gotten loose upstream. Maybe some debris from the recent storms. He continued his route, delivered his packages, went about his day. But when he crossed back over the bridge around noon, he saw it again. This time he slowed down. The water wasn't just disturbed, there was something in it, something big and pale, floating just below the surface near the western support pillar. Tommy pulled over onto the shoulder, put on his hazards, and got out of his truck. He walked to the edge of the bridge and looked down. What he saw made his stomach drop. Here's the thing about the human brain. It tries to make sense of what it sees. It categorizes, it compares, it searches for familiar patterns. And when Tommy Chen looked down into that murky canal water, his brain desperately tried to categorize what he was seeing. At first, he thought maybe it was a dead cow. They had dairy farms upriver. Animals sometimes ended up in the water during floods. But the shape wasn't quite right. Too large. Too wrong. Then he thought maybe it was some kind of industrial debris. A water heater maybe? Some kind of storage tank that had broken loose? But no. This thing had a texture to it. Organic. The pale, pinkish color of flesh. Tommy pulled out his phone and called 911. "I'm on Riverside Bridge," he told the dispatcher, his voice shaky. "There's something in the water, something big. I don't know what it is, but I think you should send someone." The dispatcher, a woman named Kelly Pruitt who'd been fielding calls for 15 years, asked him to describe what he was seeing. "It's like..." Tommy struggled for words. "It's huge. maybe 30, 40 feet long. It's kind of flesh-colored and it's just floating there. I can see what looks like arms or legs or something. I know this sounds crazy, but... Stay on the line, sir, Kelly interrupted. She'd learned not to dismiss anything, no matter how strange it sounded. I'm sending officers to your location now. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Officers David Kowalski and Maria Santos approached Tommy, who was still standing at the bridge railing, staring down at the water. You the one who called it in? Kowalski asked. Tommy nodded, pointing down. It's right there, just below the surface. Both officers stepped to the railing and looked down. The water of the Cascade Canal was naturally murky, a mix of sediment, algae, and runoff that gave it a greenish-brown tint. Visibility below the surface was maybe a few feet on a good day, but even through that murk, they could see it. Something massive, something that shouldn't be there. What the hell is that? Santos whispered. Kowalski grabbed his radio. Dispatch, we're going to need more units, and call the fire department. We might need their dive team. Word spreads fast in a town like Millhaven. Within an hour, news had filtered through social media, local group chats, the police scanner enthusiasts. By 2 p.m., a crowd had started gathering on the bridge. By 3 p.m., the police had to close the bridge to traffic because there were too many people. That's when Dr. Elena Voss arrived. Elena was a marine biologist who'd moved to Millhaven 3 years earlier to be closer to her aging parents. At 41, she'd spent most of her career studying cetaceans, whales, and dolphins along the Pacific coast. She'd taken a position at nearby Willamette State University, where she taught and conducted research on freshwater ecosystems. She'd heard about the discovery on the local news and immediately drove to the scene. Her scientific curiosity overrode any sense of caution. When she arrived, the bridge was packed with onlookers. She pushed her way through the crowd, flashing her university ID to get past the police barrier. I'm Dr. Voss, she told Officer Santos. Marine biology. Can I take a look? Santos hesitated, then nodded. Sure. Maybe you can tell us what we're dealing with. Elena made her way to the railing and looked down. Her first thought was whale. Had to be. Some kind of cetacean that had somehow gotten disoriented, ended up in the river system, traveled through the locks and channels until it died here in this canal. But that didn't make sense. The canal wasn't connected to the ocean. There were dams. There were barriers. Nothing that large could have made it this far inland. She pulled out her phone and started taking photos, trying to get a sense of scale. The bridge was about 40 feet above the water. The thing below appeared to be nearly the same length as that distance, maybe 35, 40 feet long, but the proportions were off. Whales had a specific body shape, streamlined, hydrodynamic. This thing was bulkier, wider, and those appendages extending from the mass. Can someone get me a measuring tape? Elena called out. I need to get some dimensions. A firefighter brought over a length of rope with knots tied at measured intervals. They lowered it down, using the water line and the bridge height as reference points. Elena did the calculations in her head, then did them again, because the numbers couldn't be right. 42 feet long, roughly 8 feet wide at the thickest point, appendages extending another 10 to 12 feet in multiple directions. This isn't a whale, she said quietly. Then what is it? Kowalski asked. Elena shook her head. I have no idea. By 4 p.m., news crews had arrived. 3 local stations, plus a stringer for the regional network. Helicopters circled overhead, getting aerial footage of the crowd, the bridge, and that massive shape in the water below. The footage went viral within hours. Hashtag Millhaven Monster started trending on Twitter. Conspiracy theorists flooded the comments. Some claimed it was an escaped government experiment. Others insisted it was an unknown species, proof that we didn't know everything about the natural world. A few said it was a hoax, some kind of publicity stunt. But the people who were there, the ones who saw it in person, they knew it wasn't a hoax. Because around 5:30 p.m., as the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds and hit the water at just the right angle, someone in the crowd started screaming, "Oh my God, it has a face!" Everyone pressed closer to the railing. Phones came up, cameras zoomed in, and there, just below the surface, visible for just a moment as the light penetrated the murk, something that looked almost human, a distorted, swollen face, eye sockets, a mouth stretched into a grotesque grimace. The crowd erupted. Some people pushed backward, away from the railing. Others surged forward, desperate to see. Elena Voss stood frozen, her scientific mind trying to process what she'd just glimpsed. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the railing. That's when her phone rang. It was her colleague, Dr. Richard Nakamura, calling from the university. "Elena," he said, his voice tight with something that sounded like fear. "I just saw the news footage. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Get away from that bridge. Right now." "What? Why? Richard, what?" "There's something you need to know. About Marcus. About what he was working on." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus Reeves, another researcher at the university. She'd met him a few times at faculty meetings, geneticist, kept to himself mostly, had a private lab facility somewhere outside of town. "What about Marcus?" she asked. "He's missing," Richard said. "His wife called the department this morning. He didn't come home last night. His car is gone. And Elena, his research, the things he was working on. I think whatever is under that bridge might be connected to him." Before Elena could respond, another commotion erupted on the bridge. Someone was pointing downstream, shouting. About 200 yards away, near the eastern bend of the canal, something was floating. Something smaller than the mass under the bridge, but still large enough to be visible from a distance. The fire department's boat was already in the water, having been deployed to get a closer look at the creature. Now they redirected, heading toward the new object. As they got closer, the boat's engine cut to an idle, then stopped completely. One of the firefighters leaned over the side, reached down with a pike pole, and carefully pulled the object closer. Even from the bridge, Elena could see the boat crew's body language change. They were radioing frantically. One of them turned away and appeared to be vomiting over the side. Officer Kowalski's radio crackled to life. "Bridge unit, this is Rescue 1. We need police down here immediately. We've got a body." The crowd on the bridge went silent. "Can you identify?" Kowalski asked into his radio. There was a long pause. Then, "Adult male, mid-40s, severe trauma to the head and torso. He's got an ID badge clipped to his shirt. Says his name is Marcus Reeves." Elena's phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the concrete, because suddenly all the pieces were falling into a horrible picture. The massive creature in the water, the missing geneticist, the face beneath the surface that looked almost human. What had Marcus Reeves been creating in his lab, and why was he now dead in the same water as his creation? Let me paint you a picture of Marcus Reeves before everything went to hell. Brilliant. That's the word everyone used to describe him. Graduated from MIT at 20, PhD in genetic engineering by 25. Published groundbreaking papers on gene splicing and cellular regeneration. By the time he was 30, he was being recruited by pharmaceutical companies, research institutes, government agencies. But Marcus didn't want the corporate life. He didn't want oversight, committees, ethical review boards questioning his every move. He wanted freedom to pursue his research wherever it led. So in 2010, he took a position at Willamette State University, small enough to fly under the radar, isolated enough that he could work in peace. The university was happy to have such a prestigious researcher on staff. They gave him grants, they gave him space, they didn't ask too many questions. By 2014, Marcus had secured private funding to build his own research facility, about 10 miles outside of Millhaven, a converted warehouse on 40 acres of private land. He told the university it was for aquaculture research, studying fish genetics, developing disease-resistant species, that sort of thing. Nobody questioned it. Marcus hired a small staff, a few lab technicians, an assistant named Jennifer Park, a 29-year-old graduate student who'd become fascinated with his work. Security was tight. NDAs were signed. Everyone who worked there understood What happened in the lab stayed in the lab. Marcus's wife, Catherine, knew her husband was obsessive about his work. He'd always been that way. But starting around 2015, she noticed changes. He was sleeping less, eating less. Sometimes he'd stay at the lab for 3 or 4 days straight without coming home. When he did come home, he seemed haunted, like he was carrying some terrible burden he couldn't share. Catherine asked him about it. He always brushed her off. "Just work stuff," he'd say. "Nothing to worry about." But Catherine worried anyway, because sometimes late at night when he thought she was asleep, she'd hear him crying in the bathroom. Now, as police boats circled around Marcus's body in the canal, as the forensic team prepared to retrieve him from the water, investigators were already mobilizing to raid his research facility. Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to Tommy, led the investigation. She'd been with the Millhaven PD for 12 years, worked everything from burglaries to homicides. But this was unlike anything she'd encountered. "We need to know what he was working on," she told her team as they gathered in the police station conference room. "We need to know if there's a connection between his death and that thing in the water." The medical examiner's preliminary report came in around 9 p.m. that evening. Marcus Reeves had died from blunt force trauma to the skull. Time of death estimated at approximately 36 to 48 hours prior, somewhere between late Monday night and early Tuesday morning. But here's what made it complicated. The trauma pattern didn't match a typical assault. The crushing damage to his skull, his ribs, his internal organs. It was consistent with extreme pressure applied over a large surface area, like something had squeezed him to death. The warrant for Marcus's research facility came through at 10 p.m. Detective Chen assembled a team, 4 officers, a biohazard unit, and Dr. Elena Voss, who'd volunteered her expertise. The facility was located off a rural highway, hidden behind a stand of Douglas firs. A gravel road led to a large metal building with minimal signage. Just a small placard that read, "Cascade Aquatic Research Center." When they arrived just after 11 p.m., the parking lot was empty. The security lights cast harsh shadows across the wet pavement. Detective Chen tried the front door. Locked. She knocked, announced their presence, waited the required time. No response. "All right," she said. "Let's make entry." They breached the door and entered. The smell hit them first. Chemicals, formaldehyde, something else underneath, organic decay mixed with antiseptic. They were in a lobby area, sparse furniture, a reception desk unmanned. Beyond that, a security door requiring keycard access. One of the officers had Marcus's keycard recovered from his body. He swiped it. The light turned green. The lock clicked open. What they found on the other side would haunt every person on that team for the rest of their lives. The main lab was massive, easily 10,000 square feet. The walls were lined with large glass tanks, each one backlit with blue-white LED lights. And in those tanks... "Jesus Christ!" whispered Officer Kowalski, who'd joined the raid team. The tanks contained creatures, experiments, things that had once been fish, or amphibians, or mammals. It was hard to tell what they'd started as. They'd been altered, modified, grown into shapes that nature never intended. There was something that might have been a salmon, but it was the size of a large dog, with elongated fins that looked disturbingly like fingers. Another tank held what appeared to be 3 separate organisms fused together into a single writhing mass. A third contained the desiccated remains of something that might have been a pig, but with scales and gills grafted onto its body. Elena Voss moved through the lab in a daze, documenting everything with her camera. Her scientific training was the only thing keeping her grounded. Observe, record, document. Don't think about the implications yet. In the back of the facility, they found Marcus's office. Papers everywhere, research notes, diagrams, chemical formulas, and sketches. God, the sketches. Detective Chen picked up one of the drawings. It showed a massive creature with a vaguely humanoid body plan but grotesquely swollen proportions, elongated limbs, multiple appendages, a face that was human enough to be recognizable but distorted beyond anything natural. Scrawled across the top of the sketch in Marcus's handwriting, Subject 7, Day 89. "That's it," Elena said quietly. "That's what's in the canal." They found more documentation, lab notes detailing an experiment that had begun in July 2015. Marcus had been attempting to create viable organs for human transplantation by splicing human DNA with that of several deep-sea organisms known for their regenerative capabilities. The idea was that these hybrid organs could potentially regenerate damaged tissue, resist rejection by the host immune system, and provide a limitless supply for transplant patients. Noble goals, horrific methods. The early experiments failed. Subjects 1 through 6 showed rapid cellular degeneration. They died within days. But Subject 7 was different. According to Marcus's notes, Subject 7 showed not only stable cellular growth, but accelerated growth. What should have taken months took weeks. By the time it was 3 months old, it was already the size of a large dog. That's when Marcus realized he'd created something he couldn't control. Subject 7 wasn't just growing, it was developing. Its cellular structure was stabilizing into something entirely new, something that shouldn't exist. The notes from October 2015 showed Marcus's growing panic. Subject 7 had reached a size that required a specialized containment tank. It was showing signs of awareness. When lab technicians approached, it would press against the glass, tracking their movements with what appeared to be rudimentary eyes. November 2015. Subject 7 has broken containment 3 times this week. We've had to reinforce the tank structure. The growth rate is accelerating beyond projected models. Current size, approximately 15 feet in length. December 2015. Movement patterns suggest Subject 7 may possess intelligence beyond simple stimulus response. Lab Tech Henderson was injured today when Subject 7 struck the tank wall with enough force to cause a stress fracture. We need to consider termination protocols. January 2016. Subject 7 has killed lab technician Stevens. The creature's appendages are far stronger than estimated. Stevens approached for routine feeding when Subject 7 breached partial containment and crushed him against the tank support structure. Death was instantaneous. We disposed of the body quietly. Cannot risk investigation exposing the project. Jennifer insists we continue. Says we're too close to breakthrough. To stop now. Detective Chen looked up from the notes. He killed someone. They covered it up and kept going. They found the tank. The specialized containment unit built for Subject 7. It was massive. 20 feet long, 12 feet wide, filled with a murky solution that might have been water or might have been something else. It was empty, shattered. The reinforced glass walls had been broken from the inside, massive cracks spiderwebbing outward from impact points. The metal support structure was bent and twisted. "When did this happen?" one of the officers asked. Elena found the answer in Marcus's final log entry, dated March 15th, 2 days ago. Subject 7 has achieved full containment breach. The creature accessed the drainage system before we could activate emergency protocols. Jennifer is insisting we can't notify authorities. I can't continue this. The lives lost, Stevens, Chen from the night shift. It's too much. Tomorrow I'm going to the police. Whatever happens to my career, my reputation, it doesn't matter anymore. This has to end. But Marcus never made it to the police. They found Jennifer Park's response to his final entry on a separate computer. Just a single line, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. on March 14th. "I can't let you do that, Marcus." Detective Chen grabbed her radio. "All units, we have a suspect. Jennifer Park, 29 years old. Connection to victim and crime scene. Consider her armed and dangerous." They ran Jennifer's information. Address in Millhaven, a small apartment on the south side. A car registered in her name. Her employment records. Her background check. her university transcripts. Everything looked normal on the surface. Graduate student, quiet, no criminal record, by all accounts, a promising young scientist. But when they dug deeper, they found the threads of obsession. Social media posts about creating new life and transcending biological limitations. Academic papers she'd written about the ethics of genetic modification, papers arguing that traditional ethical frameworks were too limiting, that science should push boundaries regardless of social taboos, and photos. Dozens of photos taken inside the lab, showing Subject 7 at various stages of development. Jennifer standing next to the tank, hand pressed against the glass. In one photo, she'd written a caption, "My greatest achievement." Jennifer Park's apartment was empty when police arrived at 1:30 a.m. No signs of struggle, no indication of where she'd gone, but her car was still in the parking lot, which meant she was either on foot or she'd gotten a ride from someone. Detective Chen stood in the middle of Jennifer's living room, trying to get inside the suspect's head. The apartment was neat, organized, bookshelves filled with scientific texts, a desk with a laptop, seized immediately by the forensics team, walls decorated with framed photos of marine life, microscopic cellular structures, DNA helixes, and on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a double helix, was a child's drawing, crude stick figures done in crayon, two figures labeled Mommy and Me. Officer Santos noticed Chen staring at it. "She has a kid?" "No," Chen said slowly. "According to her background check, she's single. No children, no family in the area." Santos stepped closer to look at the drawing. "Then who drew this?" Chen carefully removed it from the fridge, turned it over. On the back, in Jennifer's handwriting, Subject 7, age 6 months. First attempt at communication through provided art supplies. Shows understanding of relationship concepts. The implications hit like a physical blow. "She thinks of it as her child," Chen whispered. Back at the research facility, the forensics team was making discoveries that painted an even more disturbing picture. When they analyzed the genetic material used in Subject 7's creation, they found something shocking. The human DNA component didn't come from an anonymous donor or a cell line. It came from Jennifer Park herself. She'd literally used her own genetic material to create Subject 7. Dr. Elena Voss reviewed the findings and felt sick. "This wasn't about scientific advancement," she told Detective Chen over the phone. "This was about Jennifer trying to create something she could connect with, something she could consider family." "But why?" Chen asked. "Why go to such extremes?" Elena pulled up Jennifer's background, raised in foster care, bounced between homes, never adopted, aged out of the system at 18, no siblings, parents unknown, a life defined by absence and abandonment. "She was looking for connection," Elena said softly. "She wanted to create something that was truly hers." Meanwhile, the creature, Subject 7, remained under the Riverside Bridge. The military had arrived by this point, setting up a containment perimeter, biohazard specialists in full protective gear. The media had been pushed back several blocks. Nobody was quite sure how to proceed. The thing was too large to simply remove, too dangerous to approach without understanding its capabilities. And with Marcus dead and Jennifer missing, they had no idea how to safely contain it. That's when Detective Chen got the call she'd been waiting for. A credit card hit. Jennifer Park had used her debit card at a gas station 20 miles north of Millhaven at 2:17 a.m. "Got her," Chen said, grabbing her jacket. "She's heading north on Highway 101. They found Jennifer's car pulled off on a Forest Service road about 40 miles from Millhaven. The vehicle was empty, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. A K9 unit picked up her trail heading into the woods. The dogs led them to a creek that fed into a tributary that eventually connected back to the canal system. And there, sitting on a fallen log beside the water, was Jennifer Park. She didn't run when she saw the officers approaching, didn't resist when they told her to stand up, put her hands behind her back. She just looked at Detective Chen with hollow eyes and said, "Is it dead yet?" "What?" "Subject 7, Did you kill it? Chen hesitated. It's still alive. We have it contained. Something that might have been relief crossed Jennifer's face. Good. That's good. Jennifer Park, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Reeves. You have the right to remain silent. I didn't murder him, Jennifer interrupted. Subject 7 did. I didn't stop it. During the transport back to Millhaven, Jennifer started talking. Maybe she wanted to explain. Maybe she needed someone to understand. Maybe the weight of what she'd done had finally broken through her delusions. She told them everything. How Marcus had wanted to shut down the project after the first deaths. How she'd convinced him to keep going, promising they were on the verge of a breakthrough. How she'd secretly been supplementing Subject 7's development with her own genetic material, creating a bond that went beyond science. How on March 14th, when Marcus had told her definitively that he was going to the authorities the next day, she'd made a decision. She'd released Subject 7 from its tank. Marcus had been working late that night, alone in the facility. Jennifer had accessed the tank controls remotely, opening the containment system. Subject 7, intelligent enough by then to recognize opportunity, had escaped into the lab. Marcus had tried to run, but Subject 7 was faster than anyone had anticipated. Stronger. And it had found Marcus near the drainage access where it planned to escape. I told myself it was self-defense, Jennifer said, her voice flat. Subject 7 was just protecting itself, protecting our work. But I know the truth. I let it happen. I wanted it to happen. She'd helped dispose of Marcus's body in the canal, thinking the water would obscure the evidence. She'd opened the drainage system to allow Subject 7 to escape into the waterways that connected to the canal. She'd thought Subject 7 would disappear into the depths, that nobody would ever know. But Subject 7 had stayed near the bridge, like it was waiting for something, waiting for her, maybe. Back at the bridge site, the containment team was finally ready to attempt extraction. They'd brought in military equipment, heavy-duty nets, crane systems, specialized containment tanks. The operation began at dawn on March 18th. What happened next was captured on multiple cameras, including the cell phone footage that had started it all. The footage that showed the crowd gathering, watching as the massive form beneath the water was slowly, carefully lifted toward the surface. As the nets tightened around Subject 7, the creature began to move. Not violently, it was too weak by then, but its appendages stretched upward, reaching toward the people on the bridge above. Later, behavioral experts would analyze the footage and argue about what that movement meant. Was it aggression, fear, or was it something else? Some echo of the human DNA within it, seeking connection even in its final moments. Subject 7 was placed in a specialized containment tank and transported to a government facility. The official statement said it was being studied. Unofficially, Elena Voss heard through her contacts that it died 3 days later from complications related to its unstable cellular structure. The thing that Jennifer Park had tried to create, her attempt to build a family through science, had never been viable. It was only a matter of time before its own biology failed. Investigators discovered that cell phone footage, the same footage from the bridge showing the massive crowd, the murky water, the impossible creature below, had been the key piece of evidence that had started everything. It had gone viral, yes, but more importantly, it had time-stamped Jennifer's presence at the scene. Enhanced analysis of the crowd shots showed her standing at the far end of the bridge at 3:47 p.m. on March 17th, hours before she claimed to have been at home. That footage, combined with security camera evidence from the research facility and her own confession, built an irrefutable timeline. She'd been present when Subject 7 was discovered. She'd been watching her creation from the bridge, unable to stay away. The forensic team also recovered text messages between Jennifer and Marcus from the days before his death. Marcus had written, "Jennifer, I know you think we're doing important work, but we've crossed too many lines. People have died. This has to stop." Jennifer's response, "Subject 7 is alive because of us. Don't you understand what that means? We've created life. We've transcended the limitations of nature itself. You can't throw that away." Marcus, it's not life, Jennifer. It's an abomination, and I'm done being part of it. That was the last message Marcus ever sent. The trial of Jennifer Park began in January 2017 and lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the forensic findings, the lab records, Jennifer's own confession. Her defense team tried to argue diminished capacity, claiming that Jennifer's obsession with her work and her traumatic childhood had impaired her judgment. But the premeditation was clear. The cover-up was deliberate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Jennifer Park was found guilty on multiple charges: first-degree murder for the death of Marcus Reeves, criminally negligent homicide for the deaths of the 2 lab technicians, illegal human experimentation, improper disposal of human remains, and a host of federal charges related to bioterrorism and unauthorized genetic research. She was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. During her sentencing hearing, Jennifer was given the opportunity to speak. She stood at the defendant's table, looked directly at Marcus Reeves's widow, Catherine, and said, "I'm sorry for your loss. I know that's not enough. Nothing I say will ever be enough. But I need you to understand. I thought I was creating something beautiful, something that could help people. I was wrong. I see that now. But the intention was never to cause harm." Catherine Reeves didn't respond. She simply stood up and walked out of the courtroom. The Cascade Aquatic Research Center was seized by federal authorities and demolished. Every piece of equipment, every sample, every document was either destroyed or classified. The government wanted no trace of what Marcus and Jennifer had created. The Riverside Bridge reopened to traffic in May 2017, but for months afterward, people avoided it. There were reports of strange sounds coming from the canal at night, ripples in the water when there shouldn't be anything there. Most of it was probably imagination, trauma echoing through a community that had witnessed something it couldn't quite process. Dr. Elena Voss left Millhaven a year after the events. She couldn't look at the bridge without seeing Subject 7 suspended in the murky water below. She took a position at a research institute in Alaska, as far from the scene as she could get. Catherine Reeves started a foundation in Marcus's name, dedicated to promoting ethical oversight in genetic research. She travels the country speaking to university ethics boards and research committees, making sure Marcus's story serves as a warning about what happens when ambition overrides conscience. The canal system where Subject 7 was found has been studied extensively by environmental scientists, making sure no genetic contamination occurred. So far, they've found nothing unusual. Whatever Jennifer and Marcus created died with Subject 7. But sometimes, late at night, when the rain falls on Millhaven and the Cascade Canal runs dark and deep, people who cross the Riverside Bridge swear they can feel something watching them from the water below. The monster beneath the bridge is gone. But the memory of what happened there, the reminder of how far humans will go in pursuit of creation, in search of connection, in defiance of nature itself, that remains. For Marcus Reeves, who paid the ultimate price for trying to stop an experiment gone wrong. For Subject 7, a living being that never asked to exist. And for a community that learned that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones we find, they're the ones we create.